Hi, my name is Winslaya. We are just 1 week away from Age of Wonders 4 coming out, and welcome to this video going over the last gameplay stream, the last showcase that the devs are going to be doing. This was the 7th gameplay stream by the devs over at Age of Wonders 4, and it was quite an interesting one, quite an exciting one. They set out to show off sieges, but they put it on brutal difficulty, so we ended up seeing quite a lot of cool, interesting situations throughout the 2 hours that they played. Just like I've done with the previous gameplay streams, I've gone back and taken screenshots of a lot of the numbers that would appear on screen for a few seconds so that we can talk about them in detail together here. I have put timestamps below, so if you find any of the screenshots less interesting and you want to see what's coming up, you can use the timestamps to jump around to the topics that you'd be more interested in looking at. And important disclaimer, a lot of these numbers that we will be looking at today are from early versions of the game, and it's very likely that Age of Wonders 4 will change a lot of the numbers that we're going to be looking at today after the development process, especially if they follow a similar development process to what they did with Age of Wonders Planetfall. And everything we've seen from the streams and from the devs indicates that they're probably going to do that. They're probably going to follow a similar development cycle. I will be posting a list of the images that we're going to be talking about here on the official Age of Wonders forum. I have a little thread where I put all my videos. So if you want to look at that while we're talking about the images, if say anything is a little bit too small on the video, you can use those images to follow along with what we're looking at today. So this first image is one where they had two stacks attacking 4 units, and the 4 units that they were attacking were a penguin plus 3 piglets. And usually in a situation like this, that wouldn't lead to you losing a unit in your stacks. But because of the settings of the realm, the fact that there was this blizzard that would do damage at the end of the attacker's turn meant that there was just more damage spread across a lot of the units, and the units with less HP were easier for the AI to pick off. So what probably ended up here is that Spider got just a little bit too close, and all 4 of those units focused down that unit, or the Blizzard just triggered too many times on this unit. I think the Spider only has like 30 or so HP, so this effect hitting it just like 6 times, 5 times could be enough to kill it. And if yeah, the combat is drawn out 5 turns, then it's probably taking around 30 points of damage. Um, the blizzard is pretty interesting because it not only causes damage, it also has a chance of turning wet units into frozen, which I think means that they lose all their action points and maybe are weaker to certain types of damage. But what's really interesting is it's kind of tricky to apply wet. If you go down the tome that gives you the water elementals, they can apply wet, but themselves are wet, so you may be able to maybe dispel frozen off of water elementals and then use them to try and freeze other units. But if I was facing somebody with water elementals in their army, I would just wait that out. I just let them keep freezing their units and dispelling it until like it's not until they run out of ways to dispel magic, either through their spells or through their units' cooldowns. Next, we have a little image from a ruler. Apparently, a lot of the rulers in this environment had this seducer trait, or looked like they were some kind of seducer. If they didn't have the trait, they were dressed in some kind of like revealing clothing, and I just thought that was funny the way that that randomly generated trait or feature kind of started to tell its own story after they got into the game. And I feel like when you're playing the game, that's going to happen a lot with certain things. You're going to see like a bunch of militarists on this planet and be like, what happened here? Why is everybody so militant? Um, so yeah, I enjoyed that little aspect of the stream. I also really enjoyed when we saw these zombie cat frostling transformation units because they look so goofy. Like the cat face to me just it doesn't quite match everything else, but it's close enough that it still makes sense within game. It's just kind of goofy. I also really liked when they got to researching Tome of the Rock. That was the point where they start talking more about the Gargoyle, which is one of the units that I really enjoyed the look of. They showed off pretty early on in the streams and in the dev diaries, but I don't think we've actually gotten to see its defensive mode until this stream. So this thing's even cooler than I initially thought. It's got the ability to get Stone Skin, and it will have plus 10 temporary hit points when it just enters that defensive mode. It cannot retaliate against other units because it's turning to stone for a turn, right? Um, its zone of control extends the unit's zone of control to all adjacent hexes. So I think that means that they keep units from moving past them, maybe, which is interesting because they don't have retaliation. I hadn't noticed that until just now. This unit also becomes immune to flanking. It can't be flanked because it's got like no openings that you can get through. It's just a giant rock for a turn. So pretty cool, pretty fun unit. Starts off with a bit of HP. Not only is it cheap, it has flying and is a shock unit, allowing it to fill in a pretty important role in the dev's army. They didn't have a lot of shock, so getting this was a pretty valuable choice for them. So this next screenshot is of the phoenix and how it got frost blades because it is native wildlife to this planet, and I think anything that's like from this planet, any of the animals essentially inherit the frost blades, which does extra frost damage, and I think it reduces physical damage, and it does extra damage against the frozen or slowed units. So yeah, it's a fun little mechanic, but what's really neat about this is how it makes the fiery phoenix look kind of icy around the talons and the wings. I think that's really fun. I also like that we got to see a little bit more from the abilities here. The Fiery Breath allows it to resurrect once per battle, and it has a charge. Oh shoot, I didn't get a screenshot of what it looks like on the Phoenix. It does say Fiery Rebirth there, and this ability right here gives Fiery Rebirth, so it's probably the same text. This hero is somehow able to get something of a Phoenix. I don't know how to say that first word. It's tier 3, quite valuable. A turn after this unit dies, it comes back to life with 40% of its total hit points. I believe that would be temporary hit points, except for one hit point, but it shows red there instead of green, like the temporary hit points that the golem gets, or not the golem, gargoyle, because it's like a mixture. It'd be kind of cool if that was like a heart with that was half red, half green. Not sure if that's something the devs would be interested in doing, but I think it would be kind of cool from a just like an interface standpoint. This also does an attack to the units around this guy when he dies. He will do 15 points of fire damage. So in a weird way, it could be useful to run your leader forward and then kill him off yourself so that they can't run away from that AoE. That's a bit of fire damage. 15 isn't nothing, but is it worth having your hero drop in a fight? I don't know. Maybe if they're already low on HP, you can time it just right. Anyways, next we have some screenshots of the Empire skills that they decided to pursue in the beginning of the game. They took both Chaos and Order affinities because both of them give a really nice bonus when you're clearing infestations for the first skill. The first one for Chaos gives you a unit when you clear out an infestation, and the first one for Order gives you basically a little bit of relationship with the free cities for 10 turns, it looks like. Yeah, destroying an infestation or conquering another free city will give you a relationship with other free cities for 10 turns. So you can use that to go attack other free cities, but they were going for this skill more for the synergy for clearing infestations, so they could go out and really focus on that. And in order to make it easier for them to conquer that free city, they did end up building an outpost and raising a province on the way there. They weren't quite ready to attack the center, so while they were building units, they spent a turn destroying. It actually, no, it took them 2 turns. Yeah, it takes 2 turns to raise. I think this red bar's covering where it says it takes 2 turns, and you get 75 gold to burn down the mining province, which I think just removes the mine. It doesn't remove the gold vein, so you can like take advantage of that further down the line. This will also give the player or the ruler that does this -5 alignment. It's considered like an evil act just to burn down a little province thing. which I don't think was the case in Age of Wonders Planetfall and previous Age of Wonders games. It's an interesting balancing act. It means that if you're going to be the good guy, if you're going to be pursuing those types of interactions, burning down things for just a little bit of immediate gain won't be as good as it was in previous games. Just, I don't know, you'll be more of like the traditional good guy that doesn't go burning things down. The outposts have this interesting mechanic where work camps can annex things around them, which can allow you to collect things like special resources. I don't know if that means that if there is something like a gold vein that you'll get that income, but I think it could mean that. And that could mean that if you have a gold vein, setting up an outpost on it could take care of the upkeep and make it very easy to build a wide empire. I might end up just using all of gold veins to set up efficient outposts, create a little road network, if that's possible. That would be a fun way to play essentially a wide empire that doesn't have cities but is just covered in outposts. I think there's a Materium way to make that a little bit more efficient. Another reason they put the outpost where they did was that it provides a little bit of passive healing. I think you get like maybe +5 a turn without friendly territory, but when you're inside friendly territory, it's something like 20 or 25 healing. The point is that it's a lot more, so getting an outpost can allow you to engage in fights a little bit more quickly. After a fight, if you take a lot of damage, you may want to wait a turn or two to heal up, but you can take something that would take 2 turns to heal and turn it into one if you make your guys stand in friendly territory. I think outposts for this reason are going to be very valuable in certain realms, like the ones that prevent you from healing as easily. I think there's one called No Respite, which makes it so that you have to be standing inside of friendly territory in order to heal. So particularly in that one, you're going to want to set up outposts around wherever your armies are, just so that they can heal up a little bit faster. The next thing we have here is a screenshot of the Pyreborn hunt. This is a event where a leader wants you to go hunt a special dire penguin, the Pyreborn. This sounds like some kind of fire-based penguin. And right here, you can decline the quest to make a city very upset. I think this is an independent city for 18 turns, and you lose some alignment, which is not a bad thing for this player because they were these guys were going for evil alignment. But in general, you usually want to accept these quests. I believe they said, "I'm honored to join you," and this is the guy going on the hunt. If you complete the mission, then you can enlist a warlock, which won't be like your species or your main set of people. Um, but it's pretty powerful, and I think they ended up taking it so that they're able to go on the offense a little bit faster. This is a nice tier 2 unit that I think they wouldn't otherwise have access to, so it kind of like rounds out their attacking force a little bit more. And yeah, it allows them to do some pretty fun stuff once they actually get into combat, like weaken enemies. Weakening bolts is quite good. They also have the option to get some Imperium, so if you're going for cities, that could be quite nice, because cities allow you to get more heroes and other neat things, but I think that's more of like a mid to late game type choice. If you want to go on the offense, getting a unit is pretty valuable. They also have the ability to get a bunch of food. 389 food will give them 1 population. Is that it? Does it not give you 2? It seems like so much that it should give more than 1 pop, but the city may have been decently big at this point in the game. Can't remember off the top of my head. You can also choose 300 gold. I think 300 gold is also pretty competitive. It depends on your goals. If you need Imperium to do something, go for Imperium. If you need gold to get something done, go for gold. But yeah, it's kind of cool to see that they're showing off these numbers and how they all interact. Right here, we just have a unit that evolves, and we get to see a little bit of their stats and what they can do when they evolve. It's interesting that this is also called a Magma Spirit. They're both called Magma Spirits. It's not like Lesser Magma Spirit, Greater Magma Spirit. They're all just Magma Spirits, which means it's going to be pretty easy to lose track of where your guys are until you like look at them visually. I guess that the animation should be pretty different, so maybe it won't be too bad, too hard to figure this stuff out. Yeah, you see the visual before you see the name, so it's probably not a big deal that they share the same name. Um, and it kind of like lessens the number of units in the game. Makes sense. We also saw the Banshee in previous streams, but I don't think we actually got to see this ability, the melee mage, we may have, but basically this means that they are not um, locked out of their abilities. Their magic and support abilities can be used when they're engaged in melee, and there has to be other units with this ability or heroes that can take this ability, because that seems like an interesting tag that would be fun to play around with. And I don't know. I think it'd be kind of weird if it was just on the Banshee. Next, we have screenshots of the items that we got to see in this stream. I organized my notes so that they are all in one place, or so most of them are in one place. I think we did talk about the one that gives 5 rebirth at the top because it's similar to how the Phoenixes can do that. But yeah, I'm pretty sure everything else is all here. Murder Ring is such a silly name for an item. I like that it gives you the ability to increase your morale and decrease enemy morale when you do the same thing when you kill an enemy. So this can really make it so that you can take advantage of certain mechanics a lot more. Anything that has to do with either boosting your morale or reducing their morale is now a lot easier to trigger or take advantage of. And yeah, I could definitely see that being quite powerful. Next, we have this Staff of Radiance, which can blind people, and that's quite good. That actually comes in quite useful in the fight against the devs. I think this is an enemy, so they get to blind people, and that makes it so that enemies who would have, I think, retaliation can't retaliate, and range attacks are just like a lot harder to hit. Uh, so yeah, not bad. It's a single action, does 20 damage as well as blinding. Like that's a lot of damage for being able to apply a status effect at the same time. They have this little quick stab thing, but I don't think that that's the main focus of this staff. I think that's saying that the staff actually gives you that stab. It's interesting. I hadn't noticed that the magic blast is a range thing. You can't use it if somebody's standing right next to you, so you can stab somebody with the staff. I guess it's sharp on one end. Um, Evoker Robes gives a little bit of resistance and makes it so magic attacks do more damage. So you want to put this on a unit that does not do physical damage. You want to put this on a unit that does magic damage. And then they're going to do like a lot more. Like that's pretty significant. Taking something from 20 damage to 20% more than that is 4 more damage. I think this thing has already been boosted by that though. It may have been 16 damage boosted up to 20 or something close to that. Healer makes it so that your support abilities grant regeneration to affected units, and you can see that here. They get that regeneration. I think that's just like healing every turn after they get the temporary HP. They'll get a little bit of just like health on top of that for a few turns. I don't know exactly how many. I don't think they actually hovered over regeneration in this stream, but it's cool. It's a fun effect. It's good on this leader. They have healing abilities like restore that they can take advantage of that on. Next, we saw the heavy crossbow, which is a lot of damage, 22. I think that you need to not move in order to use that. No, wait, that says it's a single action. Oh, I think, yeah, the industrial units, when they use a crossbow, they need to not move in order to do a lot of damage. And I'm not sure if this guy has anything quite like that. He also can just stab somebody with his crossbow. Same amount of damage. It's interesting. There's another sharp point on the crossbow too. Hero of the Meek gives all of the tier 1 units in the army 10 extra hit points, 1 extra armor, and 1 extra resistance. But what was really interesting was in the fight that this hero was involved, they weren't leading any units, and the other hero was leading something like 10. No, it can't be 10. It would have been like 6 units at least. But it seemed ridiculous that they didn't put units with this hero, seeing as they're so good at leading them, and they were. I think the other hero had a bunch of tier 1 units with them, so they definitely could have taken advantage of this ability if they'd been a little bit smarter about it. If the AI was a little bit smarter about how they um, built out their armies. There's this one, which is pretty good. It's similar to the Evoker thing. It gives resistance, but instead of making you better at doing damage, it makes it so you don't take as many status effects. This could be a good way to kind of mitigate one of your starting traits, because I think you can make it so that you have more status weakness in exchange for something. No, that can't be right. No, I think I'm thinking of Age of Wonders 4 or Age of Wonders Planetfall, and how you could be like the Shikaran, who are a little bit weaker to status resistances. Um, But I think all mind and body traits are positives. I don't think there's anything negative that you can take to make other things better. I don't know. There's so much in this game. There's a lot that you can miss pretty easily. Yeah, the last item we have here is the Chestplate of Vitality, which is quite good. Getting an extra 2 defense is maybe better than 1 resistance, but not if you're dealing with magic attacks. If somebody's attacking you with magic attacks, you want their resistance. But I think it's going to be pretty powerful in the early game. I think that it will be good for going out and clearing animals, things that don't have access to a lot of magic damage. But even if you are dealing with magic damage, having that 10 extra hit points is pretty valuable. It's pretty significant. I guess that's why this is a tier 2 armor. Oh, these guys are tier 2s as well, aren't they? I'm pretty sure the Evoker was also tier 2. Anyways, we have Sprint next, which gives 3 effects. When I first saw Sprint, I was like, okay, this seems like something I'm never going to use. It gives extra movement, and I don't know if I need that on my hero. It could be kind of nice. It's got a cooldown of 3 turns, but then after you take a second and look at all the other modifiers that come with it, it starts to look pretty appetizing, pretty appealing for specifically melee heroes. So the elusive means that they can't be stopped by enemy zone of control. I think that's kind of like the gargoyle thing that I was talking about. It's something where you can't move past them. They won't retaliate against you if they're in the stone version, but you can't just walk past them, I believe, um, unless they have something like elusive. They also are slippery, so say the gargoyles weren't in their defensive mode and you walked by them in their zone of control, then there would be an attack of opportunity unless the unit moving past has slippery. They just kind of like slip past the sword, I guess. um, and Swift makes it so that they ignore the effects of terrain in combat. I think that's things like poison mushrooms or maybe foliage. Um, not sure exactly how that works, if it's just for attacks against this unit or if when they're attacking other units, somehow they're able to avoid the foliage because they're swift. But it's possible. So our next set of screenshots are focused on some of the hero traits that we got to see right at the end of the stream. I think they showed off a few leaders and their abilities that we haven't seen before. If I'm remembering correctly, we hadn't seen this resistant duelist, which makes it so that when a unit attacks an enemy, it gains a stack of bolstered resistance. Yeah, going on the offense makes it so that they are harder to damage with magic attacks, and that can stack up to 5 times. I assume that if you're using a repeating attack, you could get 3 stacks in one attack. If not, I'm I'm not sure how long that lasts, or like if you would be able to get up to 5 stacks too easily. Oh, right, bolster resistance is something else that you can get through other sources. So yeah, that makes sense. And then casting Adept is quite powerful. Voxel looked pretty happy when he saw this option. Getting 20 extra casting points in that battle means you're going to be able to do a lot more damage with your magic, or maybe support your units a little bit more with the magic. And as long as you've got the mana, that's quite nice. If you're out of mana, this doesn't do anything for you. So I don't know. I personally would probably prefer something like Resistant Duelist or one of the other options we have down here. Beloved is quite nice, giving extra 30 stability. Could take some of your cities up to higher levels of stability, allowing them to get better bonuses for certain buildings, or just from the fact that they have that stability. I think that you get extra production, maybe 10% production, and food, and one other thing if you've got one level of basic stability. After that, we see Seductive, which is something that I mentioned earlier. It seemed like 3 out of 4 rulers on this map were this had this trait where it allowed them to seduce others, which has a chance to mind control a unit for 3 turns. If this is unsuccessful, there's a 60% chance to get the mind control. If that's unsuccessful, the unit is distracted, meaning that all attacks against that unit are flanking, which honestly is pretty good. You may even not want the mind control so that you can kill off a unit a little bit quicker. If you get the mind control, that's pretty good, but there's a lot of things that can dispel things like mind control. I know in Age of Wonders 3, a lot of people wouldn't value mind controls as much as stuns or things that would kill a unit, because taking them out of the fight is better than just having the enemy use a dispel, when you could have gotten more value out of your actions. Awakened or Awakening is a really interesting mechanic for the high culture. They get the ability to make it so that you get one of 4 special effects when you put this modifier on your units, at least on the basic units like the shield units or the polearms. Polearms will get, yeah, the extra spirit damage, and on top of that, they get Awakened Guardians, which is an extra retaliation. Most units like this only have 1 retaliation, so this guy can now strike twice, I believe, in between turns. When somebody walks by them or attacks them, they can retaliate. And yeah, this Awakened is better on repeating attacks. If you have a single attack that's just +4 damage, but if you've got something like arrows, you can get an extra 12 damage on your turn from taking 3 shots and getting +4 3 times. The other guys get this one. Well, the shields get Shield of Light, which gives +1 defense and +2 resistance. Quite nice, especially if you're facing against people who are doing magic. Like, this is just generally useful, getting a little bit of extra defense and a little bit of extra resistance. The only thing that could make it a little bit more generally useful would be 1 defense, 1 resistance, and like 5 or 10 HP on top of that. That could be kind of fun to play around with. But I guess gaining HP from a mechanic like Awakened might be tricky to keep track of. I don't think they can lose Awaken once they're awakened in a fight. Maybe I'm wrong. Um, Seeking Missiles is probably the best one, though. This is the one I think Voxel was saying is amazing. And it pairs really well with things like Seeker Arrows. Seeking Missiles gives +1 range and an extra 20% accuracy. I believe Seeker Arrows gives another +1 range. So all of a sudden your attacks go from being, I think, 5 ranges away to 7 ranges. It's almost like turning your arrows into snipers from Age of Wonders Planetfall. Next we have this support unit, which can give the Awaken buff. You can get Awakened through other sources, but this is the way you're probably going to be doing it at the beginning of the game. You're going to be building this unit or using the one you started with to give Awakened, and I think a target friendly unit gains Awakened for 3 turns. I thought it was an AoE. Maybe, yeah, I think that could have been a spell that does the AoE Awakening. But yeah, it looks like this one has range 4. It's a free action. You can do it every other turn because I think it's a cooldown 1 means that you can't do it the next turn, but you'll be able to do it the turn after that. So you can just spread Awaken to all of your units slowly this way, or you can use other sources to get it out a little bit faster. This unit also will be able to create distracted units or make units distracted. That was a thing that we talked about earlier for the failed check for seduction, I think it was. It's interesting. I don't think I've seen distracted come up in previous streams, and it came up in 2 different sources in this stream. So yeah, this unit is going to be quite good at making other units easier to kill, making it so that all uh, attacks against that unit are flanking. It'll mean that they do at least 20% more damage, I believe. I don't think it's less than 20%. It could be though. Oh, right. And you can make it so that other units that aren't the high culture can be awakened by using this research dormant enchantment. Will make it so that your non-high units can get either dormant guardian if they're a polearm, or the shield of light if they're a shield unit, or seeking missiles if they're either ranged unit or a battle mage. And then the other one that we talked about not too long ago, Radiant Light, goes on support units, which can be a good way to make some of your, I think, later tier summons get these benefits and like fit the synergy of what high culture is generally trying to do, what they generally are good at, which is a little bit of extra magic damage from the enlightenment, but also things like boosting your units, like picking a unit and making that one a lot better for the rest of the combat. After that, I remember they showed off something pretty special that I think I may end up using more than I would like, but still it's nice to have it as an option. If you accidentally make a province something that you don't want it to be, you can take it offline for 3 turns and turn it into a different type of province improvement. I really wish that there wasn't lost income there, because it's going to end up punishing newer players more than it is veteran players. For the most part, veteran players will be pretty good at planning ahead and not having to respec their things. Of course, that happened in this stream. Of Voxel was quite good at the game, but he was like, oh wait, this should be something else, so I want to respec it. So I think there's reasons why you wouldn't want to do this. It probably would mean that it would make sense to always go for farms first and then respec into something else later, because then you get more pops and that allows you to get other resources quickly. But I don't know. It's something where I always feel like I want to just reload a save and make the decision the right way, but you can't do that in certain situations, specifically in multiplayer, or if you've only got so much time in the day, right? So they decided they wanted to do this specifically for Sunshrine, which wanted to be, I think, surrounded by farms. So they decided to replace the conduit, no, not with a farm, but with a research post. I think, yeah, the Sunshine benefits from having adjacent research posts. At some point they did show off a little bit more about the magic materials, and I believe I have taken screenshots of these before, but I didn't go back. I just took some more screenshots to make sure we got a picture of what you get when you get all 3 of the liquids. You get something like Cosmoso Flux Elixir. Yeah, Cosmo Flux Elixir, which gives extra knowledge and mana. That was a Voxel's favorite, and that makes sense. Being able to get to the later stuff earlier is always nice, and mana is always useful for your spells. It's just, yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like even once you feel like you have too much, there isn't too much damage in getting a little bit more. It just gives you more wiggle room for later down the line. Another set that they showed off was the ores. You can get the Rings of Binding, which give +1 defense and resistance and bonus damage specifically just to the heroes. This effect is empire wide, just gives mana nodes make more stuff. And this one is saying your heroes specifically do something else. There is a third one. I don't see it right here. Plants? Yes, plants. We saw plants in one of the other streams. So I think I did take a screenshot of that at one point. After that, we have a bunch of hero skills that they showed off throughout, and they did seem to take a little bit extra time to talk about the sources of each of these. I do think it would be pretty cool if underneath where it says Warfare Novice Hero Skill, it said something like from Tome of Rock or Tome of Rock Novice Hero Skill, because um, it's it's not immediately obvious with all of these ones. With Searing Blades, you could probably guess that comes from Pyromancy. From Obsidian Weaponry, you can probably guess that comes from Tome of the Rock. But for a couple of them, it's a little bit less obvious. And I think just having that spelled out would benefit people and make it easier for people to test things and make a bit of a plan in the long term. So searing weapons, they make it so you do fire damage instead of a little bit of physical damage, but overall you do more damage than you lose out on, and you get extra damage to targets that are burning. I think we saw something like this for frost damage, so that this specifically only gives the extra damage when targets are burning, whereas the other one gave it when they were either slowed or I think frozen, maybe. Yeah, that sounds right. So I have to assume that burning is just a like generally more easy to get status effect or a better status effect. I think we've seen quite a few units that can set the ground on fire because they have fire attacks, so it may be just more common. Obsidian weaponry will make it so that your base melee and physical range attacks gain a 60% chance to inflict bleeding, which I believe is a damage over time. That's how bleeding worked in Age of Wonders Planet Fall. It would take off like 4 to 8, I think, damage every turn for maybe 3 turns. So I assume bleeding works pretty similarly in Age of Wonders 4, but maybe I'm wrong. Seems okay. I don't know. I feel like maybe Searing Blades is better than that in general. I think you'll get more damage off of that, specifically because there's not a percent chance that you do nothing. I mean, I guess if you miss your attack, there's a percent chance you do nothing. But I don't know. I feel like inflicting bleeding sounds okay, but is it really equivalent to spending 1 point on Searing Blades? Twin Awaken uh, is interesting because it's like the Awakening that we talked about earlier, but this one targets a friendly unit and another non-awakened unit within 2 hexes. So it's not an AoE, it's 2 units. It uh, can affect 2 units for the cost of a free action with range 4. So you have to be kind of close to the guys that you're trying to awaken, but you only have to be close to one of them because it will jump another 2 hexes to the other one, so they could be kind of far away from the hero that's doing the twin awakening. This one comes from high culture, makes sense. Awakening is a high culture mechanic, so um, that one was a little bit more obvious to me. But I think they weren't quite sure if coordinated strike came from high culture, but they seemed like both of the devs were in agreement here that this came from high culture. It makes it so that when this hero is a leader, they will make the battle mages, ranged units, and skirmisher units be able to mark with their range attacks and magic attacks. And I believe mark makes a unit either take more damage or be easier to hit, or maybe both of those things. They seem to think coordinated strike was pretty good when they were talking about it briefly. It is an adept hero skill, which means that you have to learn a certain number of support skills before you can take it. Right now it's saying learn 2 more, and I think they don't have any in the support skill tree right now, so maybe that you just need 2 to get to adept, or maybe that you need 3 or 4. I can't remember off the top of my head. Um, Next we have this one, exposing light, which will, it seems like it would make sense for the high culture. It does light damage, but maybe it comes from another source like a tome or something else that they grabbed along the way. Exposing light will make it so that you can deal damage in a 1 hex radius. 22 damage in a 1 hex radius sounds pretty good. That seems like a lot of damage. Um, it's got a range of 6 and it's a full action, and you can't use it when somebody's inside your zone of control. So um, it's something that you'll have to take in consideration. This is quite good if you can get close and keep your battle mage away from the enemy. Otherwise, this unit could die before he gets to do his big scary attack. It's got a cooldown of 2, so you can use it pretty often. And I think that's pretty much everything I can say on that one. All right. The next section I have here is sieges, and you may be thinking to yourself, this seems like a pretty light point in the video to start talking about sieges, as the focus of the dev stream was to get to sieges, but it actually took them over an hour to get to the sieges, to even, I think, waging the siege. I had a lot in my notes here that I wanted to cover before talking about that stuff, things that were independent from sieges. But yeah, basically when you get to a city and you move an army over to siege it, it'll give you this little pop-up saying basically how long it will take if you don't take any siege projects in order to breach the walls and start a battle. Right now it's saying 2 turns because it looks like the village has 20 fortification, and yeah, you usually have 10 at the beginning of the game, but you can increase that through, I think, certain units, and siege projects essentially is the main way a lot of people will be increasing the rate in which they're able to breach a city or attack the units inside the city and take the city over. The first siege project that they have here looks like it gives you an extra +5 siege per turn, I think that is, and it comes at the cost of taking a little bit of extra physical damage at the start of combat. Units besieging the city take 20 physical damage at the start of combat. That's quite significant. I don't think I would take this unless maybe it was quite late in the game and I had units that had like 150 health and there was like 0 chance I was getting into a combat, just to make it so I could get into the city a little bit quicker. But I don't know, that seems like a weird one to take. I guess there's ways to heal that that may allow you to deal with that. Or I guess if there's something like precognition in Age of Wonders, Planetfall, maybe just a way to make it so you don't actually take that damage. Onagers is probably going to be my way of sieging cities. It is expensive. It costs 250. Did I get one for undermining the walls? I did not get one for undermining the walls. I'll have to see. Ah, there it is, there at the top. So this says, yeah, you can spend 100 gold to make an additional hole in the wall, so it's easier for you to walk through the openings. Not not terrible, not amazing. I don't know. I think yeah, onagers seem like a better thing to do. Yeah, undermining walls will give you a little bit of extra siege progress, +3. I don't know. Doesn't seem worth it. Getting extra units in the fight, however, that's a pretty big deal. At the start of combat, you get 2 onagers on the attacker's side until the end of the battle. They are immobile siegecraft units with long range area effect that are great at destroying obstacles but are inaccurate against units. So yeah, if you target units, you might it might scatter and hit a different hex than you were expecting, and if you're unlucky, that could end up hitting your own units. Um, this scattering effect, I think, is kind of like the missing effect where it chooses one of the hexes around where you shot, but for things like rockets and Age of Wonders Planetfall, I think you scatter 2 hexes away from where you targeted. So you could end up going in a complete opposite direction of where you intended. Um, this says only one type of siegecraft unit can be brought into combat. If multiple things could be brought, only the strongest will appear. Yeah, I think that you can take these onagers or towers or other things like that, maybe magical creatures, some elementals, could be kind of useful. I think pyromancy probably has something that like causes fire on the map. That would make sense thematically for me. And then harass defenders is that last one. It costs 60 gold, and it says the units defending the city take a additional 20 physical damage at the start of combat. To be honest, I'm not sure. Um, Comparing that to the onagers, that might actually be better because that's just going to be a lot of damage across the board. And if you don't need to breach the walls more than they're already breached at the beginning of combat, I don't know if you need the onagers. That's something that I'll have to think more about once I'm actually playing the game. Onagers, yeah, we did get to see them in the combat because that is what they ended up going for, and it looks like they do 15 damage. Uh, they have a cooldown of 1. They start with a cooldown of 1, and their range is 3 to 12. So they can't hit units that are right next to the catapult, but they can hit really far away. That's kind of like a sniper rifle in Age of Wonders Planetfall. That's quite good. Um, Only 30 HP. I think it says 2 defense and 2 resistance. So decent defense and resistance, but garbage health. If people get close to your onagers, you're in trouble. You want to keep these guys relatively safe, relatively far back, so the enemy can't just pick them off with one unit or maybe an operation. You know, like that an operation plus a unit could be a lot of damage on one onager. You know, relative to their amount of HP they have access to. I am curious about how turrets are going to be. They did talk about the balancing there. So if you do stand in between 2 turrets, you can't get hit by 2, but not all 4 of them. And I feel like they could be very nice if you can hide your units underneath them and they have enough range. There is a lot more melee focused type units than in Age of Wonders Planetfall. So I don't know. I found myself not building turrets a lot in Age of Wonders Planetfall. I used to build them a lot when I was fighting the AI, but players know how to like not get hit by those, or if they are going to get targeted by turrets, they're going to make it so it's a unit with really high evasion and most of the turret shots just miss, or when they do miss, it might end up hitting your own units. The turret might shoot its friendly units when it misses an enemy who's standing next to a friendly. So, you know, keep that in mind when you're making turrets. I did actually just reorganize my notes a little bit. I know I didn't have these 2 lines here about turrets and sieges a second ago, but I decided they were more related to what we were just talking about than the other stuff. So let's see. Basically, if you are attacking a city with a turret, you can shoot out a tower or a turret's floor in order to kill it. If you destroy the ground underneath it, then it just dies and you don't have to get rid of the HP. And I don't really understand how that's easier to do, but it does sound pretty silly, pretty funny, and I want to see how viable that is once you know the game is actually out. I want to play around with that and make a little video on it because I think that sounds like a fun way of dealing with turrets, even if it isn't the most efficient way to do it. Who knows? It may be incredibly efficient, and that's going to be like the meta. I kind of hope it is because it sounds fun and sounds silly. Sieges cost gold, so they went for a lot of early gold and mana. At turn 12, they still only had 1 city and they had 2 full stacks of units, and they were doing that so that when they went on the offense, they would have more actions in the fight, and they would also be able to cast lots of mana for spells, making it just a little bit easier to get that that upper hand in the early game against those independent cities, and it worked pretty well. Even on brutal difficulty, Avoxel was able to win all of those fights. That there were some of them he lost a lot of units, but it was ultimately a victory. And I think you got to take risks like that in a game like this in order to get an advantage. And it's just like that's part of the nature of playing on the harder difficulties. You're going to get some losses. Avoxel really likes this unit, the Night Guard. I think it is a shadow unit. It says that it's kind of like the shadow culture units, I believe, and it gives Dark Stalwart at the end of its turn. Adjacent enemy units have a 90% chance of having sundered defense or sundered resistance. That means their defense goes down by one and or their resistance goes down by one, depending on both of those checks. I think those checks are made independently of each other. That's pretty good. That's pretty powerful. That's a good way of weakening higher tier units with a lot of armor and resistance, because usually things that are like tier 3 or 4 or 5, they'll have more than 1 point of armor and or 1 point of resistance that you can get rid of. And doing that earlier in a fight makes it easier to get rid of their HP and win the fight ultimately. This unit also has things like First Strike. It's a pole arm, so it has First Strike. Defensive Tactics, I think, is another just like basic thing. Cold the Weak is from the Shadow culture, so yeah, I believe that this guy just inherits that because that's part of its origins, its story. When you get certain units through Rally of the Lieges, like this polearm, they can allow you to kind of like mix and match different starts. So this guy can, yeah, make it easier for them to apply damage, and then the other guys that are from the high culture may be the ones that are actually more about dealing the damage. I mean, polearms are good at going forward and doing damage too, but you know, they may be supported by some magical high culture units like the supports that may cause distracting and other things like that. I mean, yeah, distracting is amazing. If you can get distracting on a unit before all of your units do their melee damage, then you're going to get a bunch of easy flanking attacks, a bunch of extra damage on top of the basic stuff. I know we saw the Corrupted Soul in a previous stream. This guy came up from the same event. I think it's like Harbingers of Death or something like that, or Destruction, or who knows what exactly. I don't have the picture in front of me right now. But I don't believe we saw the Hopelessness modifier. This makes it so that each morale level an attacker has below neutral, this unit gains +1 armor and resistance. So if he's able to reduce other people's morale, then it's going to make it harder for them to deal damage to him. And it's just kind of like after a while, it starts to feel hopeless, like fighting against this guy, or it's supposed to give that kind of feeling. But of course, you could fight against it with things that are unaffected by morale. So it's it's just like a interesting trait, and I like the name for it. I think it's funny. It just like yeah, invokes a lot of emotion. And we're almost at the end of it. We got, I think, 2 more images. When they took the city from the cursed toadlings, they were uh, debating either migrating it to Shadowborn or I think raising it. And because they needed the economy, they decided to migrate it. I mean, raising it gives a lot of gold. Like 450 gold is a lot, and you can use those city ruins to start a new city if you wanted to. But I think that takes 4 turns and a bunch of Imperium. So I don't know. That might, and also they lose all the pops. When you migrate to Shadowborn, they just lose a single pop, I believe. So this guy went from, I don't know, it looks like 5 pops down to 4, or you could just like reset the process and get 450 gold and while you're doing it. Vassalizing a conquered city is an option. I don't know how likely they would get along with you if you conquered them, versus vassalizing them the diplomatic way. Of course, you could just absorb them, but if you attack them, I have a feeling that they probably won't like you too much. And that's it. That's everything. I can't believe it. We got to the end of the last gameplay deep dive stream before the release of Age of Wonders 4. I'll be doing a lot more stuff like this as we get closer to DLCs, and I'll be making a lot of cool weekly tips videos once the game comes out. So if you enjoyed this type of content, keep an eye out on the channel, and I'll see you around.